So long story short, not only is the Great Pyramid a scale model of the planet on a scale of 1 to 43,200, but that number is also defined by a key motion of the planet itself. And the Egyptians thought the world was flat.
Doesn't really add up, huh? If a huge comet or a fragment of a comet hits the ocean and creates a massive tsunami, that is a flood that just happens instantly in a day, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like that would be, we're talking a tsunami wave 600 feet high, going 200 miles an hour in your direction.
Hello everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Climbing Mount Stupid. I'm your host Hendrik, and today we're diving deep into ancient prehistory. This will be the first of many where I want to talk to people involved in piecing back together our past as a human species. As you'll hear in the following episode, our past is way more dynamic and mysterious than the current historical model suggests. I was joined by Rivus, or as his social channels are called, Phant0m Un1verse. Rivus is one of those people who has an exceptional flame of passion ignited within him, which drives him to make content surrounding ancient prehistory, mainly on TikTok and YouTube. We were supposed to live stream on YouTube, and I couldn't, if my life depended on it, figure out how to get the audio working, so we decided to record off air. We had about 30 lapses in internet connection, so keep that in mind while listening. I tried to edit everything as coherent and understandable as possible. Despite all the setbacks, Rivus was an absolute champ and overall an awesome, patient, and cooperative guest and human being in general. So I just want to thank him once again before we jump into the interview. I hope you enjoy us talk about cataclysms, archaeological anomalies, ancient global lost civilizations, and much, much more. Enjoy. Mwah.
Let's start again.
All right, fourth time's a charm. All right,
Yep.
So I'm joined with Rivus today, and I appreciate your time so much more than you can believe, man. You have a TikTok channel with about 360,000 followers on there. And the way that I found you is that I was ranting to one of my friends about ancient history, which is a recent intrigue of mine. And he sent me your channel actually the day after. And I started watching one. And before I knew it, I was through the whole channel and I had followed you. And what I found very odd and cool is that you make bite-sized content basically about a topic which is very broad and very dense and might seem very boring to a lot of people. But you make it very interesting, and you keep it up to date. You talk about new stuff that's coming out. So I was wondering what made you decide to make the first TikTok, and how did you get into the field and the interest of ancient prehistory?
Definitely. So the TikTok thing was completely unexpected accident, basically. After this coronavirus thing started taking off, and everybody started like hiding in their houses, I went up to live at my parents' house, up with my parents in my parents' house. Oh yeah, and get up there chilling, and my little sister comes up and she's like, "Yo, you should get a TikTok." I'm like, "What's TikTok?" She shows me it. She's like, "Yeah, you should talk about your conspiracy history stuff." I was like, okay, whatever. So I downloaded the TikTok and like started making a few videos. And then, the first few videos, if you go back and watch the old videos, like I'm a completely different person. I'm just like, yeah, this is this. Yeah, blah, just being super boring with it. And by the end of the first week, I had like 10,000, probably 25,000 people following me at that point. And I was like, wow, that's pretty crazy. And so I just kept making videos on the topics that I find fascinating, that I've been studying on my own time for the past 5 years now. Until I had all of a sudden 200K followers. And it was funny. I got funny. So I was talking to my dad about it because he knows I've been doing it. He's like, "How many followers you got now?" And I was like, 200K. He's like, "What?" He's like, "What are you talking about?" It was funny. But yeah, I mean, people really, I think what it is the way we're taught about history in school is it's just to like get the information to you in the most boring way possible. And it's not the teacher's fault. It's the people in the background's fault. But we're not going to talk about that today. History isn't made out to be as interesting or as mysterious as it actually is, because they don't, in my opinion, show you the actual mystery behind our history. They show you what they claim is the fact about history, and that's just it. They don't tell you about most of the stuff in the background. Some places do. I'm not saying everywhere's the same, but any type of history, from my experience, learning while growing up, was always very drug out and boring as all get out. There's just no way around it. Talk to anybody about history and they hate it. And then I hit around 17 years old. I wouldn't. No, I remember my exact age, but it was the Joe Rogan's podcast with Randall Carlson back in 2015 that actually sparked my curiosity. He had the podcast, and it's just this old dude talking about history when we're talking like 12,000 years ago, and the massive cataclysmic shift in climate going from the Pleistocene into the Holocene, and just how from the glacial ice melting caused these horrific floods, and the ocean levels rose by 400 feet, giving birth to all these massive cataclysmic flood myths our species have been passing down for thousands of years. And once that domino for me fell over, showing that that's an actual reality, it just took me down this rabbit hole of consistent listening to everything I possibly could. And how I would do it, I wouldn't read anything really. I would honestly plug in and listen to audiobooks, podcasts, documentaries, anything audible I can get my hands on, and I'll just sit, work 8 hours a day, and just listen to stuff. Do that for 5 years, and you accumulate quite a bit of information. And now here I am. I guess you can call me TikTok famous at this point. Is that what that is? Is that what I am?
Yeah. Now you have to start dancing, actually. At 500,000, you need to start doing the dances.
That is not going to happen. But, and here I am talking to you now, and I got a bunch of other things happening in the background that weren't available to me until the coronavirus, I guess. I guess thanks coronavirus for this, because this would not have happened if it wasn't for that. So
blessings in disguise, I guess.
Well, no, coronavirus is something else. No, it's just crazy.
I've actually got a very similar origin story, I would say. My first, let's say, introduction with like ancient prehistory and stuff that doesn't really align with what we previously believed was when Graham Hancock came on the Joe Rogan Experience the last time, talking about his most recent book, America Before. And man, I remember I started listening to that podcast at like maybe 11, 1 hour before midnight, and it's almost 4 hours long. And I thought, oh, it's all right, I'm just going to go to bed, listen to a podcast, fall asleep after half an hour. But I listened through the whole thing, and then afterwards I just couldn't fall asleep just because I was so mind blown by everything that he presented in that podcast. Oh yeah, and he's had Randall Carlson and Graham Hancock on his podcast, together multiple times. Oh, so good. Yeah, they're so good. Those two people. Now, for people who don't know Graham Hancock, real quick, people don't know Graham Hancock. The academics and all the people in high places call him a pseudoscientist. Okay, that's why he's had such a disdain against his name, is because people throw out this word. He's a pseudoscientist, and then everybody just ignores what he says. No, Graham Hancock is an investigating journalist. Okay, he goes to places and writes about what he finds. That's all he does. He's a transferer of information. He's not claiming anything. He's just presenting these facts with his opinion behind it. And if you don't listen to people's opinions, I don't know what to tell you. It's people's opinions. We're not trying to do anything other than have a different perspective that might, in my opinion, completely better explain our history. It makes, once you connect these dots together, it kind of really makes you go, wait a minute, that makes so much more sense once you actually start diving into it. Right, because one of his quotes is, we're a species with amnesia. Yes. And that just, I was thinking about it today when I was walking outside. It turns out to be very believable. If the whole new paradigm of history seems to be right, then humanity is basically Jason Bourne, and we're trying to remember our past before the time runs out and we get hit by another meteor or by another solar flare or whatever might happen, a super volcano. What are your favorite sources? Because you said you like to listen to audiobooks, you don't necessarily like to read. I know Randall Carlson recently started a podcast called Kosmographia. Oh yeah. Kosmographia, eat that up all day. What's great about Kosmographia is that Randall Carlson, he has such a library of information that he's accumulated for 40 years now that he can just spout out like nobody's business. He's a remarkable individual. Has a great podcast where he's going through basically every single paper and he's talking about it and showing the different arguments on both sides of the equations on a specific thing and connecting those puzzle pieces for you. And he's got so much material out on YouTube, so highly recommend anybody to go listen to Randall Carlson talk. But other sources, honestly, not gonna lie, it's been a whole lot of just typing into YouTube so-and-so lecture,
and then just listening to a dude stand in front of a classroom of people, pointing at a presentation, PowerPoint or like on a chalkboard. Quite literally, I've been listening to classroom lectures about ancient history and stuff like that, and the findings that we have, like when they come out, like for an example, when the what was that dude's name? I don't remember his name. When the papyrus talking about that they claimed was the how we built the Great Pyramids. They know how they built the Great Pyramid, blah, 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 and it was just like this papyrus. I watched all of those presentations. And I'm like, guys, this has nothing to do with the pyramid. It just says they went to the pyramid. It doesn't say they did anything when it came to building the pyramid. But for actual books I can give you, like right now off the top of my head, I'd have to go back and find them. Christopher Dunn, I think his is Power Plant Egypt is one really cool way of thinking about these structures, especially the Great Pyramid being a actual electrical generator. So that kind of stuff is always cool.
I think I've seen, like, I'm not sure if it's the right name, but like electromagnetic photographs of the Great Pyramid, and there's like different heat signatures in different areas of the pyramid. I don't know if that has anything to do with that.
No, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it was this German scientist. I'm not going to try to pronounce his name. What they did is they took a much smaller scale of the dimensions of the pyramid, like a super small scale, and they shot different types of electromagnetic frequencies at it. And at certain frequencies, it like quite literally focused the electromagnetism in a specific direction. And the way it is the electromagnetism would be forced directly down into the planet.
Oh, yeah. Gotcha. And so, do you bundle all your information? Do you have like notebooks, or is it just listening and re-listening and re-listening?
There's things I type out, but it probably wouldn't make sense to much of anybody besides me, because it's just chaos. Like if you open up my Google Docs and you'll just scroll through, a lot of stuff is untitled, which is a horror. I'm feeling the consequences of that now. I'm like, where was that? And everything's untitled, so it's like you got to go through each one. So. Yeah, it's going to be way harder to figure out my notes than it is going to be figure out what's the purpose of the Great Pyramid at this point. So, but a lot of it has just been off the top of my head, and I might just go back and like brush up on some numbers and dates on a few things to make a video. But quite literally, like when I make a TikTok, it's just be like, all right, what do I need to talk about that I haven't talked about yet? Oh yeah, that thing, that was this. Here, get all the photos, make the video, post it. There's no real science to it. You just do it. I don't know. I don't write anything out. I just talk.
So we're talking about findings that rewrite history to some degree, well, to a big degree, and new revelations, new scientific reports. What is, in general, what is the old belief and old paradigm of history, and to what is there now to what paradigm is there now a lot of evidence suggesting that there might be something totally different that happened in our past?
Very good. So how basically everybody's taught about history today is that humans, imagine a timeline of 200,000 years. We're probably older than that, but let's just stick with 200,000 years from now. Okay, for the majority of this existence, humans haven't really been doing much other than like banging rocks against rocks to create spears, and living in caves and just discovering fire for like all of this time. And then around 12,000 years ago, this planet goes through this massive shift in climate, that going from the Holocene during the Ice Age, the freezing temperatures of the Ice Age, up to the warmer temperature that we're experiencing today in the Holocene. And basically after that transition happened, it's as if civilization just came out of nowhere. 11,000 years ago, boosh, we have people with agriculture, and there's no real like evolution of technology that we would see. Like you see the difference in the type of technology as it progresses, but we don't see that around 11,000 years ago. It just all of a sudden happens until it progresses slowly until we've discovered like the wheel, then electricity, and then boosh, here we are going to the moon. And so it goes from doing nothing to just skyrocketing in technological achievement. And that kind of is, okay, that's fine. That clearly can happen because it did happen. But the problem is how I think about it is, think of how many technological achievements you can fit in 200,000 years. Just imagine like from the discovery of electricity alone, back in like the early 1800s, was it? I forget the exact date, until now, has been just this little short period of time. And we already know that the ancients were experimenting with electricity with the Baghdad batteries. So who knows how many other times that they were manipulating this one little thing. So that's the old paradigm shift. The new paradigm shift would take into account that these people were probably relatively smart and able to have technological achievements far earlier, or should I say later in the past than we previously expected, possibly to the point where they could have been a technologically advanced civilization by definition. So the new model is that during the Ice Age, humans, or what some other type of species, but I would say it's humans, were a globally advanced civilization. I think that the connection between all these cultures across the planet and where these structures are spaced out and the similarities between them suggest that humans were a globally connected civilization during the Ice Age. And then from 13 and 11,000 years ago, went through a cataclysmic event so devastating it almost made our species go extinct like it did the mammoth.
And the dinosaurs.
We are the descent. No, not the dinosaurs. Dinosaurs are 65 million years ago. We're only talking 12,000 years ago.
Okay.
The Ice Age, the Holocene. No. Yeah. So, but the mammoths were roaming around 13,000 years ago with us. You know, they were there, and they didn't make it through, but we did, because we're still here. And so, it would suggest that humans were a technologically advanced civilization. It basically goes into like prehistory, before any real writing. That's not the starting writing. There were civilizations before in ancient antiquity that were completely decimated, wiped clean, and erased, then lived on top of to erase it even more by future cultures throughout a much longer period of time than we originally thought. And we are just the current iteration of Homo sapiens with technological go-karts on the streets.
And what makes you think that humans would have been a global civilization thousands of years ago? What similarities or what clues are there to make that idea?
Well, the first one I would say is the similarity between all their myths. They have all these connections that you can find between their deities and their stories that are so similar that they might as well be from the same source at some point. Because remember, when we're talking about myths, we're talking about translations of copies of spoken words for thousands of years. There's no real connection we can make there, but just make note of it, right? Then if we look at a satellite view of the planet and we begin to map out where all these structures are, you can begin to see patterns on a scale to where it's quite a global effort, it would appear, to create all these structures on this perfect line. It's called, if you were to look it up, I would type in connecting ancient sites and just look at the line of structures going around the planet. And the pyramids are one of them. A whole bunch of stuff like Cuzco, Sacsayhuaman, Easter Island, Mohenjo-Daro are all on this line. And the structures we find in Egypt, along with South America, it's called polygonal stone masonry. It's this crazy way of manipulating stone into these crazy shapes to make all of the stone fit literally perfectly to one another, to where you can't fit a piece of paper in between the stone. And we have no idea how to cut stone today like this. People say they can, but I've never seen any example of it. And
also, are you sure we can't?
I've yet to find anybody attempt polygonal stone masonry.
There's no. Are you sure that there's no big stone masonry with a hard to cut material that's possible this day?
We can cut stone. I'm not saying we can't cut stone, okay? But the effort, the type of stone structures we create today are not on the same scale or quantity of the ancient world. It's as if the ancient worlds had nothing but stone to work with, and they use it for everything, is what it seems like. But they were able to do it in such an effortless way. They could just lift stones so big it would blow your mind, and be able to fit that stone perfectly to another stone in its opposite, curve, perfectly, consistently everywhere, to a level to where the structure is so sound it is essentially earthquake proof, which is why it has lasted in its same formation as long as it has, excuse me. the walls of Sacsayhuaman in South America are quite literally earthquake proof, and that's nuts.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. I went, and this was, I'm a bit gutted that this was little before that I listened to that Graham Hancock podcast. But I went to Egypt 2 summers ago, and actually went to the Great Pyramid of Giza. I went into the King's Chamber as well, and I didn't know it at the time, and I did notice it, but I didn't know how heavy those stones were. But in the King's Chamber, there are granite blocks that weigh, I think Hancock says something like between 70 and 100 tons.
It was 70 to 80 tons.
70 to 80 tons.
About the relieving, like above the King's Chamber.
Right. Those upper chambers, and you quite literally can't fit a piece of paper between. Like they're so immaculately, perfectly. There's the amount of perfection and precision is just mind blowing. And the King's Chamber is, you have to walk up like a very narrow corridor, upslope, to get to the King's Chamber.
Passageway.
Sorry?
You go from the ascending passageway into the Grand Gallery, that huge, really big room, right?
Yeah.
And then you go up into the King's Chamber.
Oh wait, I might be wrong. The Grand Gallery, is that the one with the coffin in?
No, the King's Chamber has the box in it.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. And before you get to the King's Chamber, there's a little room, and then before that little room is the Grand Gallery, the big opening, like vaulted ceiling type thing. I forget the exact I forget the exact term for that, but it's this huge opening that then goes down into the entrance of the Queen's Chamber. So you have the King's Chamber right here, the Grand Gallery, okay, that goes into the Queen's Chamber right here, that goes a little bit further down into the outer, like to where you exit, and then it also can go back down further into the subterranean chamber down below, which is 100 meters or 365 feet underground.
That's right. Man, that structure is... It's like, it shouldn't be there. It's impossible.
Well, it's clearly not impossible.
Well, no, it's not. But it, like, how the fuck?
From our current model of history, yes, it is impossible. I believe that. I do not believe that these ancient individuals who just now figured out, they did not have the wheel available to them. It had not been introduced into Egypt when they were supposedly building the pyramid. So they were doing it with sleds. Okay, so this is basically what the whole pyramid thing is. This is what we've believed since the 1800s, by the way. This hasn't changed yet. They believe that the Egyptians built all of these structures using copper chisels and stone hammers with sleds because the wheel had not been introduced yet. And they were able to build the Great Pyramid from start to finish in 20 years. And in order to build that structure in 20 years, you have to continuously place a perfectly cut stone perfectly every 5 minutes, 24 hours a day, nonstop for 20 years. And you saw the inside and how perfect it all was, right? Well, here's the thing. If you were to cut one of those blocks wrong or set it down wrong by a degree, each block after that, above it or around it, would then be wrong and gradually worsen in error as construction continued, causing the internal structure to become warped, possibly, if bad enough, making the whole pyramid bulge, lean, or spiral before you would ever get to the top and not come to a perfect point with all of its corners. Then on top of all of that, you throw in the fact that the Great Pyramid has 8 sides, which most people don't know about. There's a concavity at the center of each side dividing that triangle into 2. That complicates the mathematical geometry of the structure so drastically, you are 8 times more likely to get that precision and symmetry wrong. And that's just with the Great Pyramid. That's just one of them.
I mean, isn't it also that the whole thing is like 2.3 million blocks, and my favorite TikTok of yours is the one paper sheet where you put in all the mathematical, you could say, hidden Easter eggs that's embedded into the pyramid that relate to the dimensions of the Earth, right?
Yes. The Great Pyramid is a scale model of the planet, and this is how. if we measure the perimeter around the Great Pyramid of Giza, we find 3,024 feet all the way around its base. If we take this number and multiply it by 43,200, which is not random because it's how many seconds are in 24 hours, and there's another connection, but we multiply that by that number, and we find the circumference of the equator around our planet at 24,000 miles. I'm not going to be able to convert that for you right now, sir. I'm sorry. Take the height of the Great Pyramid and multiply it by that same number, and we find the polar radius of the Earth, giving you a three-dimensional image of the dimension and curvature of our planet. It accommodates for it being an oblate spheroid. It's not a perfect circle. And the reason why 43,200 is not random, another reason, is that as our planet spins, it has a tilt, which also rotates like this wobble, called the precession of the equinox, which makes 1 degree of precession on the horizon every 72 years. It's very subtle. You can't tell it's there by the naked eye. And 43,200 is a multiple of the number 72. So long story short, not only is the Great Pyramid a scale model of the planet on a scale of 1 to 43,200, but that number is also defined by a key motion of the planet itself. And the Egyptians thought the world was flat.
Doesn't really add up, huh?
I don't think so.
As well, it's pointed to true north, east, south, and west. And the surface area of the pyramid is not an exact square, just as the squares of the meridian lines of the globe. If you put the lines over the globe, you get this square grid. If you then were to multiply or just make the square of the surface area of the pyramid bigger, then it would fit exactly into one of those meridian line squares.
The north wall is smaller than the south wall,
right?
So it creates this angle, and if you were to extend those angles out, it would follow the meridian lines to the North Pole and intersect.
Right. It's
quite literally mapping out a meridian line on the surface of the planet.
Exactly. And isn't also I'm gonna mess this up, but I think Cairo is I'm gonna mess this up, but in the beginning when they were dividing the world into time zones, they were first thinking of putting Cairo as GMT 0 instead of, which is now Greenwich in England, because the meridian
geographical center of all landmass of the planet.
Exactly, that's it. Could you explain that to me, please?
Yeah, they wanted to put this building, I forget which building it was, in the geometrical center of landmass globally, and it'd be like the center point of the planet. Well, guess what? The pyramid's already there. It's already right there where they want, and they're like, "Oops, that's a coincidence. That's just a coincidence. Let's go put it over there instead." Yeah, it's just really funny. But then on top of that, if you go and look up the coordinates to the Great Pyramid of Giza, have you done that one yet?
I have, and it's the speed of light, but it doesn't. It's not super precise, and no. Egyptians, they measured in cubits, right? And the speed of light is in.
Did the Egyptians build the pyramids though?
Okay, but speed of light is in kilometers or miles per hour. I find it important to listen to both sides of the coin, and I'm not convinced on that one because measurements were just different back then and now.
Maybe. Where does our actual measurement system come from, though?
Yeah, it's a decimal system, huh?
And we find out that the ancients, the further back you go in Mesopotamia, they knew what a meter was. There were multiple meters that they discovered back in ancient Mesopotamia. I got to go back and find them. I'm not gonna be able to source that off the top of my head right now. I just know I read something somewhere saying that there are meter rulers somewhere in the Mesopotamia. So don't take me off on that one right now, but I'll go back and find that one.
I've written it down. I'm going to check it out for myself. Is something else about the pyramids? Because we were talking about only the Great One, and you said, well, there's only the Great One. Is there other peculiarities with the other two big ones?
Well, I mean, the whole plateau creates Orion's belt, and then if you zoom further out, the other pyramids scattered throughout Egypt create the rest of the constellation. So the whole constellation, yes, of Orion, it's right there throughout Egypt, using all those pyramids is to symbolize the stars within the Orion constellation.
No way. I knew I think it was Robert Schoch that did the Orion connection. I might mess the guy up by name. I might get it wrong, but I didn't know that there were other. I knew that the 3 were Orion's belt, but I didn't know that the rest of Orion was also scattered over Egypt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then there's lots of other crazy stuff that I'm not like I don't know a whole lot about it off the top of my head about it, where like even the pyramids with the Sphinx create a whole bunch of mathematical equations and stuff as well, like when it comes to like the spring solstice and like the solstices and stuff like that, when the sun comes up right in front of the Sphinx, and how it gets so freaking complicated with these structures. It just makes you like wonder. It's like all these people just figured out how to make papyrus to even be able to write information down. How are they already coming into this technological world with all of this remarkable mathematical capabilities? Like how do you do mathematics without any type of way of writing yet? And you know about Göbekli Tepe, correct?
I do.
Right. Okay. Well, now it's not so much mathematical stuff, but the problem is with Göbekli Tepe is that when it was supposedly buried under the ground, humans weren't really creating anything according to the current mainstream historical narrative. They were just existing and surviving, is what they say. Okay. And the sophistication of Göbekli Tepe is the major problem. The site is huge. There's just hundreds of these circles of these huge 20, sometimes heavier, 20-ton stone pillars standing 20 or 19 feet tall, scattered throughout the ground, purposefully buried, and carved on the stone are all sorts of different types of high relief artistic renditions of all sorts of animals and constellations in the sky. And they don't even know if they're going to be able to undig it all or like to unbury it all. In fact, they're trying to say is that we need to protect it, so we need to just not discover it anymore. And I'm kind of thinking, okay, I understand how you want to protect it, but the problem is whenever somebody buries something in the ground, they're trying to preserve it for someone in the future, in my opinion. If you want to preserve something, the best way to make sure it lasts for as long as possible is to bury it in the ground. You've seen those things where people have like those time capsule tubes, right? You put a bunch of stuff in the time capsule, you stick it in the ground for people who knows how long later to dig back up again and see what you wrote. Okay, that's the whole purpose of burying stuff like Göbekli Tepe, in my opinion. Exactly. The people built Göbekli Tepe because they knew information would eventually be lost, completely forgotten. They understood that languages change over time, writing changes, conquering and conquest of destruction of everything takes place. So if you hide it and just don't let anyone know it's there, eventually someone will dig it up, and hopefully they will have good intentions.
Exactly. And I think it was just a farmer that stumbled upon the site in Göbekli Tepe. And yeah, the enormity of the site, I've seen drone shots of it, and it's so unbelievably big. And then the scholars at the site say that it's about 5%, maybe a little bit less, that's been dug up right now. So they think the site is absolutely gigantic, and like you said, it's been buried intentionally, which is, I mean, it just adds to the question mark that is Göbekli Tepe, right?
Definitely. And I don't think we should not investigate it further. Definitely think we need to dig up the rest of it and preserve it the best we can, with it being able to be observed. And they're already kind of starting to do that. They put like this massive roof over top of it. But the problem is with that. The problem is with building this, like putting a building on top of this to preserve it, is Göbekli Tepe is very likely an astronomical calendar in some way, with the way the
like
stones are facing and like certain solstices. So when you block away the sky, you completely turn off the capability of deciphering the code. So what they need to do is figure out a way to project the night sky above Göbekli Tepe in its dome, is what they need to do. Like live where the stars are in that moment, and like you can like fast forward and backtrack. That would be amazing. Imagine like a huge like dome projector screen thing.
Man, I really, really hope they start digging that piece up, because I was listening to a lecture about it, and this guy that was giving the lecture, he estimated that it would take about 100 years to unearth it all.
160 is what I heard.
Oh, Jesus. Yeah.
So it's gonna be a while.
It's gonna be a while. Yeah, exactly. I was wondering, so how important is it for you to understand our past better? And I think this lies against, what is your objective with making videos on this subject? Why is it so important to understand our past better?
Because those who do not study the mistakes of before are bound to make them again. If you don't know somebody's already gone through the horror you're getting ready to enter, if you had no idea that political action was taken already back there and people already went through it, you're going to do it again eventually, because you don't know the consequences of it because you didn't study your history. And when it comes to like deep history, when knowing our origin, I find to be one of the most important questions to be answered that mankind has been plagued with since our beginning, as it seems. We don't know who we are. We don't know where we're from. And anybody who claims they know, how do you know is my question. What can you show me besides some of these other things that other people do that just doesn't make sense to me? How do you know that that's actually our history? Well, I haven't found a really good answer to that yet, but we're going to find it. But it's important because I find it to be fascinating and not enough people do. And here's the other thing is I think we're not really taught history anymore. You're just taught enough to get you through, to get you that certificate at the end of the year, kind of a thing. Okay. If we had enough people actually interested in history and having these questions, bringing these questions forward to people who can answer these hardcore questions, we got to start doing it at some point, is my opinion. And from what I can tell off TikTok, people are thirsty for more. They can't get enough of it. And I'm eventually getting to the point where like I'm starting to run out of things I can do off the top of my head. So I actually have to start researching again now to keep up with the monster I have just I think what it is that it's a good time to give everybody something else to consider in these crazy times, because I feel like whatever we do find out about our past, I think the rippling consequences of that are going to have a far greater effect on our consciousness and where we are as a species right now. If we know, like for example, if we know that tomorrow everything could end, that object could come out of the sky and everything could end tomorrow, I think might give people a different perspective. That doesn't mean to go out and do whatever you want. No, I'm not saying that at all. Obviously, be a good person. There's not enough of them out there, it seems like today. Well, I shouldn't say that. There's plenty of good people out there. It's just all the bad ones are up in front of us all the time. Let's put it that way. But it makes you appreciate the now that much more, is what it does. Is that understanding that in tomorrow your world will no longer exist, I think gives you a better perspective and how you should act in life, is what I would say for that.
It's a humbling thing to keep in mind, huh?
Definitely. And we get wake-up calls all the time. I just did a video about the Russian meteor in
Chelyabinsk. Oh,
Chelyabinsk. Tunguska. I haven't done Tunguska yet. I'm getting ready to do Tunguska, but we get hit by objects all the time. They're always hitting us. Okay?
I mean, if you look at the moon, it's just one big ball hit by craters. We're just lucky that we have an atmosphere that slows them down or breaks them up. But the thing is though, is if you remove the atmosphere, if you remove all of like the fauna and all the plant life and just have Earth, the Earth would look like the moon. Yeah, it would.
That's the crazy thing about it. You just can't see it.
Yeah,
because it's all buried.
I was watching this video recently, getting my information off the school of YouTube, and there were 9 huge big ass rocks in our solar system that could actually, and I'm not sure to what degree this is true, but that could actually shatter the planet.
I wouldn't be surprised, and I bet you there's bigger ones too.
Yeah. There must
And
be, right?
those are just the ones we know about.
Right.
Because here's the thing: when Chelyabinsk got hit, they were watching a meteor go by us.
Oh, is that the one of the dash cams?
Yes.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, they were watching this one go by us, and then we got hit from behind from a little fragment following next to it. And if the first one had hit, that would have been real bad. That would not have been very good. But here's the thing, though: you can't just go shouting to people. Yeah, we get bullets coming by us all the time. People would freak out. Well, I'm sure people will freak out. But here's the thing: does that mean we just plug our ears, close our eyes, and ignore it until we get hit? I think that to be extremely stupid. Absolutely not. So. And this also comes like the argument of like, oh, we need to why are we studying space so much? Whereas, we haven't discovered the oceans yet. Well, here's the thing. You're not going to go to the oceans to escape a cataclysmic event. The only way to escape the next cataclysmic event to take place on this planet is to leave. Go somewhere else. And who's to say that at some point, some kind of civilization hadn't done that in the past?
Yeah.
I mean, we already say there's life out there. Okay, there's life in the universe somewhere else. There's no physical possible way that we are the only life to have existed in the planet or in the universe. I don't believe that at all. Then the question is, has these extraterrestrial beings achieved the capability of coming to us from deep space? Well, I agree with people that that's probably extremely very unlikely for them to be able to find us to begin with, just to find us, then make that travel. And then, but if we kind of kick the box out the room for a moment that everybody's been thinking inside of for a while, if technological advanced civilizations have existed before and have left the planet to escape these cycles of cataclysm and have returned periodically to coming back down, that sounds a lot like these myths that have been passed down for thousands of years of these beings and gods coming out of the sky to restart civilization, quite literally, like in the ancient Sumerian cuneiform writings, talking about the gods bringing the plow and showing them how to build.
Is that the Anunnaki, or is that something else?
Yes, that would be the Anunnaki. Yes.
So these meteors that we're talking about, this is the Taurid meteor stream, right?
Yes.
Could you mind what is it in general?
So the Taurid meteor stream is the fragmented tail of an ancient giant comet that has passed by the sun many times. And at each pass, let me explain a comet real quick for people who don't know. A comet is like this massive, dirty snowball way far out in space that gets kicked into the inner solar system by some kind of gravitational pull or push, whatever you want to call it. Okay? And as it gets closer to the sun, the ice and gas begins to what's the word I'm looking for?
Defragment?
The ice basically starts to melt and crack and fall off, and it outbursts, and it begins to let go of all of its material in this big long tail behind it. And then it loops around the sun. And it just does that again and again and again. And all this debris that it's been releasing this whole time gets turned into this dense, cylinder of material wrapping around the sun. And our Earth's orbit passes through that cylinder twice a year.
And that's when you can see the meteor showers in
October, early November.
Exactly. Yeah.
The reason why that's significant is because in October, what's in October for us in here in America? Halloween. Or in other places, the Day of the Dead. Why is this the Day of the Dead?
November 2nd, Mexico.
Man, I gotta brush up on this again. But there's a bunch of not myths, I forget the word I'm looking for, but symbols within folklore and stuff like that. For example, the one that comes off the top of my head, I'm not positive this is correct, but the witch's broom, the witch is flying in the sky. Okay, well, the broom in some places is a symbol for a comet, the tail of a broom coming out the end, and it coming out of the sky and brings destruction and disease and stuff like that. There's better examples than that one, but that's the one I can think off the top of my head. But the Day of the Dead is in October is because one day in October everything died. That's the
dark.
only way to explain why that's that day, in my opinion. And you go back and look, and all these impacts that happened, for an example, Tunguska, it didn't happen in October, but it happened here in June on the opposite side of that same meteor stream is when Tunguska hit us. And yeah, Graham Hancock explains it like this. You have a highway, and you just walk across it willy-nilly with a blindfold on like twice a day, okay? And some points, like it's at a lot of points, there's just nothing in the highway at all. You're just walking, doing nothing. And sometimes a motorcycle goes by. Sometimes a car goes by. Sometimes several cars go by. And sometimes it's heavy traffic with huge trucks. And you just keep walking, and you're just lucky enough not to get hit as often as you probably should get hit. But we do get hit.
We do.
And we've gotten hit several times. And not enough people have woken up going, oh, did you hear that big blast that just happened over top of Russia? No? Yeah, that was big.
Yeah. I think, when did that happen? Like somewhere in the 1900s?
Tunguska happened in 1908.
1908. And
Sorry, go ahead.
And there's still like a place where nothing grows, where the impact crater is.
Yeah, at the center, basically the crater, the center where the air blast hit, because Tunguska, the object never hit the ground. It exploded in the atmosphere into all these fragments. So a massive object never hit the ground, but the shock wave, the center point of the shock wave, where it hit the ground, nothing grows there now.
Yeah, and
it's just this circle of no trees.
The trees are just flat like hay that got run over by a car. It's insane, those pictures back then.
Really old photographs and whatnot, and the video taken by, I forget the dude's name. It'll be in my video when I put it out, but the guy who actually got to, and here's the thing, when the event happened in 1908, but they didn't actually be able to get to the site until 1927.
Oh.
So several years went by before they actually showed up to take the pictures you see.
Huh.
And what you see is that just these decimated forests where these trees were just knocked down like toothpicks from this massive concussion blast that came out of the atmosphere from a huge object. Dude, the object was huge. 110,000 tons going 33,000 miles per hour, creating a blast 184 times the size of the Hiroshima nuclear bomb going off. 44,000 degrees Fahrenheit. I forget the exact number in Celsius right now, but that is big.
That's fucking frightening. Jesus Christ.
That's amazing. And it never hit the ground. That's the crazy thing. And here's the thing, though. The reason why it didn't hit the ground is because the material it was made out of is what they think. Because we still don't technically know the type of material. But normally when an object explodes the atmosphere like that, it's usually just like a really shallow space, or not shallow, really like spongy space rock. Let's put it that way. There's not a real like to it. But the object, do you know about the Arizona crater?
It rings a slight bell.
Yeah, there's this big, if you can look it up to get a picture, it's this huge crater in the Arizona desert. I forget the exact width of it, but the same size object as Tunguska created that crater. The only difference is that object was iron. It was like a bullet coming into the atmosphere. It just punched right through it and hit the ground and just made this huge hole in the ground. You could fit the Washington Monument in it, like from like the base of it to its top. It's super deep.
Yeah, I think I've seen pictures of it before. And it's frightening knowing that there's just rocks that can kill a city just like that.
Yeah. So let's back it up here. Let's explain what exactly the theory is that happened to this supposed ancient civilization. Right? What happened? Okay. Well, the science suggests that is really starting to really come out as basically confirmed at this point. They haven't officially announced it, but it's going to be eventually, in my opinion, is that 13,000 years ago, the Earth passed through the disintegrating tail of a comet and was hit by multiple massive projectiles, okay? Like we've just been talking about, these huge explosions happening in the sky everywhere, with some objects actually hitting the ground. And the majority of the impact was on the Laurentide ice sheet on top of Canada and parts of northern United States. 2-mile thick glacier of ice that had been sitting there for hundreds of thousands, probably millions of years.
And that ice sheet is thicker than what the North or South Pole is today, right?
Yeah, we're talking 2 miles thick. of solid ice, glacial ice, super thick. And this huge blast of heat from these objects hit this glacial ice, melting a decent portion of it all at one time, vaporized massive amounts of water molecules up into the atmosphere. And the meltwater from that heat cooled down as it rushed across the glacier until it finally entered into the oceans, completely disrupting the currents of the ocean of the time, the conveyor belt system of heat and cold to keep the climate stable. So that happens, destabilizing climate, the temperatures globally. And then the ejection cloud of the comet and impacts wrapped around the whole planet, blocking out the sun completely. And also the heat from the impacts sets fire to 10% of the Earth's biomaterial. And 10% of all of the Earth's forests burning at one time, the amount of life lost would be unfathomable. Like 10%. So that goes around the planet. You get all this smoke also going up into the atmosphere, and you have a recipe for the whole temperatures globally to then drop, which is exactly what we see what happens in the ice core data that we've done so far. You have around 15,000 and 13,000 years ago, and then boosh, a massive spike in temperature from where we got hit, most likely. And the fallout makes that temperature drop back down into freezing. And the bottom of the temperature drop is called the Younger Dryas. 1,000 years of what's basically nuclear fallout until something happens again around 12,000 years ago. 12,000, it was 11, crap. I forget the exact date.
I think it might be 11,800.
That's probably it. But it's somewhere around that time period where we come out of the Younger Dryas into the super warm climate that we're in right now. And there's a bunch of different ideas how that could have happened. Robert Schoch has the idea that we were hit by a solar flare. And how that would make sense is that the object that we went through 13,000 years ago hit the sun, creating a massive coronal ejection into space that the planet then went through and heated up real quick. And there's a lot of things to suggest that, ancient people saw these crazy patterns by the lights in the sky from all that radiation hitting the atmosphere, and they drew out these pictures. That's fair enough. Or the idea is that we got hit by another object, but this time into the ocean. And if it did that, first of all, the tsunami it would create would be biblical. and it would vaporize and eject trillions of gallons of water up into the atmosphere all at one time. That would then condense and rain back down to the planet for days to weeks to months on end, as stated in the Bible and many other ancient myths all across the planet. And now that the whole climate is so humid, it would then get baked by the sun and then level out into the modern climate that we experience. And it would just kind of like gradually bring it up and cool it down, or warm it up, basically, as guess. But I mean, that's all just theoretical. I mean, that's obviously none of that is actual proven anything yet. It's just a way of thinking about it now. But and so as the temperatures increase and level out, all of the glacial ice that has been existing for hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years begins melting, and at some points melting rapidly, to where the water from the melting would pool into these massive lakes on top of the ice that still existed, until as it could no longer hold back the weight of all that water, it would break, releasing all of that water down the landscape at one time. Imagine a 1,000-foot wave, several miles across, tearing across your neighborhood at 60 to 100 miles an hour. All that depends on how steep the grate is when it comes to the ground, like how steep the hills are. If it's steep, that water will be moving extremely fast.
Right, and say that did happen. These ice lakes that just break under pressure. That's what Randall Carlson is talking about when he's discussing the. I think it's in Washington, the Washington Scablands.
Yes. Mm-hmm. Yep. Washington Scablands, Potholes Cataract, Camas Prairie Ripples, Dry Falls, and one of the big stories in the academic world is called the Missoula Flood. That was one of the really big breaks where it just completely decimated a massive portion. I'm not sure how to spell that off the top of my head, but the Missoula Flood was one of the really big ones that took place. But all that water from all that melting had to go somewhere. So all the ocean levels globally rose by 400 feet to where they are now in our modern day.
In what time frame did that rise of 400 feet happen? Do you know that by any chance?
I want to say it was about 300 years. I'm not positive about that off the top of my head. I'd have to go back and look at the actual charts again. But about 300 years from going from where they were to 400 feet deeper.
Which is still a significant difference. But as you mentioned earlier, if a huge comet or a fragment of a comet hits the ocean and creates a massive tsunami, that is a flood that just happens instantly in a day, right?
Oh, absolutely. Like that would be... We're talking a tsunami wave 600 feet high, going 200 miles an hour in your direction. There's no escaping that, and we see evidence of those kind of tsunamis in Madagascar. It's called these chevrons. It's where the tsunami wave is pulling all of this sediment from the ocean floor with it, and once it hits land, it begins to deposit all of that material on land.
How do you spell that? Chevron.
Chevron, Chevron. I want to say chevron.
That's new to me. I haven't heard about that yet.
I will look at Madagascar chevrons for that. The object likely did hit within the Indian Ocean, and it had. If the crater they think they found, I'm pretty sure they found a crater there. There's no good pictures of it though. That's 18 miles across at the bottom of the Indian Ocean.
What is that? That's like 25
that's right.
kilometers. Jesus fucking Christ. Oh, that's scary. So these flood myths, right? Well, at least I know of Noah and the Ark and in the Bible. It's probably one of the most well noted and well documented flood myths. What other flood myths are there?
So the Pawnee.
What are the Pawnee? Is that are those Native Americans?
It's a tribe. Yeah, tribe of Native Americans.
Okay.
The story goes that the dude back in the late 1800s went to this house, and there was this this really old Indian wise man. I think it was a chief actually, and he began to write down all of the stories from this chief. And one of the parts of the stories, and I'm gonna have to go back and find the actual book again and the actual name so I can source that again. But one of the stories talks about these giants that ruled in the ancient worlds. These huge beings and beasts that were so big, that they could make the ground shake essentially. And they became prideful and were boasting and thought they were the greatest ever. And their god, I forget the name of their god, didn't like that. So he caused the waters to rise. And from the rising of the waters, all of the smaller creatures were consumed, but all the giants were, boasting and still see, we're still surviving. And so he caused the whole ground to become mud so that the giants sank into the depths of the earth as well. So that's one ancient myth from an ancient Native American tribe. And there's many others saying that it was just a beautiful, perfect day, and then came this horrendous earthquake. And then up above the hills, you could see this massive green wave, as they describe it, tearing across the landscape. And the only ones to survive were the ones who were at the tops of the mountains. And all they could do was just watch as their whole civilization was destroyed in front of them. Then obviously you have Japanese stories and Chinese stories. Some of them are people being turned into fish, going to hide in a bunch of shells under the oceans. The flood myth is quite literally everywhere.
Wow. What are the types of cataclysms that are civilization enders, basically?
Well, you're not gonna like that answer, bro. I'm not gonna lie. We're already kind of going through that right now. If this actually, we kind of dodged a bullet with this one. Okay, if the projections were correct on the coronavirus and how bad it would have been, it would not have been civilization ending, I wouldn't say, but it would be pretty freaking close to chaos globally. Okay, and we're getting ready to feel the consequences of the actions we took to stop this thing come fall when that finally comes back. But I'm pretty sure Randall Carlson has a video where he went through and explained all of the events that has happened within the past 10,000 years that could have been a civilization ending destruction. And one of the most recent ones, It happened in the 1800s, right before, like right at the beginning of like electricity coming out, and people are using Morse code. The planet got hit by a solar flare, really, really bad solar flare. 180, I don't remember the exact date. I have to go back and look at it. But anyway, it was so intense it set barbed wire fences on fire. Yeah, the amount of electromagnetism hitting the planet, just anything that had cable and copper and metal basically became extremely hot really fast, essentially, put it that way. And so you had these people like with Morse code little things with all of their technology exploding in front of them. If that happened to us tomorrow, that would be bad.
Yeah.
That would be real bad. And, when you say like civilization ending, there's obviously a massive gray area. Like, are we talking just like a setback, or are we talking putting us back into the Stone Age?
Yeah, let's start from setback and then work our way up to back to the working with rocks.
A solar flare would be an extreme setback. I don't think it would destroy everything on a level, an object from space, changing the very atmosphere and state of our planet would. For an example, let's imagine you're sitting there and a 1,000-foot wave tore across your neighborhood, pretty bad, never-ending torrential rain and hurricane winds on a scale you couldn't possibly imagine, with massive earthquakes and volcanic activity, with the ocean levels rising 400 feet over a period of time. That is a restart.
Yeah, that would suck a big fat dick.
That would suck. That would suck bad. Okay, that's a restart.
Jeez.
Like for an example, if we got hit by an object 200 feet across, or like let's say 17 meters across, going 44, let's say 33 kilometers per hour, or like I don't know the math of that. I'm throwing out weird numbers. I don't know what they scale to. I'm just gonna say it in my way. Let's say it's 170 feet across, going 40,000 miles per hour into the atmosphere right above New York. That would be bad. Like it would blast buildings down if it came close enough, and basically singe and burn everything underneath it.
Yeah.
And that would be a city destroying object. Yeah.
Yeah, there's some dangerous stuff out there.
And it's crazy to think. But here's the thing, people get overwhelmed by this kind of stuff. It literally is as if the planet is trying to kill you, because yes, it is. Everything wants you dead. That's just the fact, okay? And we have to figure out how to survive and thrive in this chaos. And I appreciate the challenge because it's hard.
It is.
We've made it this far.
If it wasn't hard, it wasn't worth it, huh?
Yeah, no joke. No joke.
So if we're talking about possible ancient advanced civilizations, what's been thought now or theorized now is that they've been able to sustain civilization for much longer than we've been able to do now, right? For example, the Roman Empire has been around shorter than the Egyptian Empire, and then perhaps the Egyptian Empire might have been around shorter than what came before.
Yeah, like ancient societies, like for an example, I'm an American, and we're only like 200 so years old.
Mm-hmm.
Like, just think of that. I'm just like, wow, that's crazy. And the Egyptians lasted for a really long time until they finally hit the dust. So I can only imagine if there was a civilization who basically had it figured out really well, especially like, let's say, our civilization. If nothing hits us, we can go for a really freaking long time. Who knows? Thousands of years. If we can get a civilization to last 10,000 years solid without any interruption, imagine the level of technological achievement somebody can, the population would have.
Yeah, isn't it? I heard Elon Musk on Rogan recently, and he's thinking that people can communicate telepathically in 10 years through the Neuralink chip that he's working on right now. Drag that on for 10,000 years and who knows what's possible.
It sounds very alien, doesn't it?
It does sound very alien. You said something very interesting. Like, what elements of societies from back then do you think we actually miss right now in our society?
What elements did they have that we don't?
Yeah, possible elements. Or structures.
We're talking about like minimum, like actual material elements. Like, what do you mean by elements?
Like societal structures, maybe something.
Okay, I gotcha. I mean, yeah, I can imagine. Like, for an example, not too long ago in South America, millions of people were living there. We didn't know that until we had LiDAR, where we could remove the forest and look down and see actually how many structures and people were there. And so I can only imagine that there were millions of people all condensed. When you have more than like 100 or so people, you have a society. When you get to the thousands, you have a civilization of people living all in this one spot. Okay. And there have been countless, in my opinion, civilizations existing all throughout time and all sorts of different types of iterations of technological achievement. And go ahead.
I was, because in the very beginning you said something and I wrote it down here. What are the Baghdad batteries?
The Baghdad batteries. There are these pots that they found in Egypt. I forget exactly where in Egypt, that had a copper core to it, and they were filled with some kind of acid, and they could actually produce very small amounts of electricity. And to get larger quantities of electricity, you would have to have more pots or batteries. Man, everybody's trying to call me now. You have to have multiple of these pots of batteries to have a more charged electrical, what's the word, man? It's escaping me right now. The more electricity you want, the more pots you need. Let's just put it that way. And, they say that they were using it for like ceremonial purposes and all this kind of stuff. Well, maybe they were, maybe, I don't know. I feel like it was them. It's hard to say what they were going to use that for. We don't really know. But we know ancient people were doing something with the electricity long ago. We just don't know exactly what. Mm-hmm. And then you have like these hieroglyphs of these light bulb looking things.
I was thinking about it just when you said it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Could that be such a Baghdad battery, for example, or?
It doesn't depict anything that looks like a Baghdad battery in that. It looks like this weird device with this cable that runs into this big bulb with a dude sitting there. And we don't exactly understand what that's trying to portray at all. Unfortunately, there's a lot of speculation involved with it. But it would make sense if it was some kind of light bulb, because that's what it looks like. But that could be our technological bias, because that's what light bulbs look like to us. What if it's not a light bulb? What if it's like they're blowing bubbles? It's just a bubble.
Yeah, we're just making theories out here.
Yeah.
Out of all the archaeological anomalies, which one stands out the most in your eyes?
The Great Pyramid. Hands down. There's no competition.
Have to agree. Yeah. I mean, we went over it, but that structure is such a big fucking question mark.
Yeah, obviously there's other really cool, crazy things out there, like the Luxor statues in Egypt, where like it's perfectly symmetrical all around the face of the statue. That's in granite. And talk with anybody who actually works with granite on a level to where you have to create something like that, and they'll be like, what, like how? They don't understand. And people, I made a really I made a really out there comment in one of my videos. It's the one talking about the big boxes in the Serapeum, the granite boxes.
Right.
And at the end of that video, I was like, we cannot create this with our modern day technology. People didn't take kindly to that. People don't like being talked down to. I believe that. I don't believe we could recreate those boxes, and here's how. Sure, we could maybe cut granite to look like that. Maybe. It has never been done yet, so I can't say that we have. That's the other thing that these people don't understand, is that has never been done. But the problem is let's say you have somebody who can create anything, and you put a vehicle in front of them, and you go, I want you to recreate this exactly as you see it. And they, okay. So they build it exactly as they see it. But the problem is you never gave them the key to show them it could turn on. So they created a replica, but they didn't create anything that has an actual function and purpose. And I believe that the reason why these objects are so precise, with such a level of precision, is because they had to be. There was a functional reason for it being that precise. Like, art art comes after technological precision. Like, for an example, it wasn't until we had the ability to create all of these precision, like cogs and everything that we do in our machines, until somebody took that and created art from it. Does that make sense?
Not right yet, no.
Not right? Okay. How can I explain this further then?
What do you mean art, like the granite boxes?
Yeah, I don't believe them to be just artistic renditions of something to bury something in. I think I believe there to be a functioning purpose for them. Because if you've been in them, and I've never been, so I'm speaking from ignorance. This is based off what other people say. When you sit inside of a box and like give out a humming sound like a huh or it reverberates. There's a vibrational state in many of these boxes, and even in the Great Pyramid itself. I'm sure when you were inside the Great Pyramid, just talking, you could hear your voice echoing throughout this whole thing. The acoustics of many of these objects are through the roof, and we don't exactly understand what's going on with that.
Mm-hmm.
So with my car analogy, if that made any sense, it's probably not the best analogy to use, but this guy can recreate visually everything they see from the actual vehicle here as a complete perfect copy,
but not functionally.
But he doesn't know the function of it, so all he's doing is recreating it. So how could we possibly say that we 100% can recreate anything from the ancient world if we don't even understand the technology to create it?
Mm-hmm.
What was the technology that created it? Well, they say it was copper chisels. I don't believe you.
It takes a long fucking while to do that, and there's so much precision carved granite in Egypt that, I mean, it is possible, I guess, but over lifetimes, and you need so much people to do it, and that seems a little bit out there too, to be as a theory.
And that's just from what we've found. Who knows how much more is under the sand?
Man, that's what I've been thinking. Like this LiDAR technology flying over the Guatemala and countries in over the Amazon. Have they done that yet over the Sahara?
They have in some places, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I don't know if they found any. I don't know if they found anything yet. But I don't know off the top of my head. I have to go back and look at that. We have been doing that in South America. I think the problem is funding and location. The Sahara Desert is not a fun place to be.
Nope.
Let's put it that way. 127 degrees on average in midday. That's pretty insane.
Yeah.
Pretty nuts.
To the point where you can just fry an egg on a car,
Yeah, and it doesn't matter how high in the air you go. At some point, it's always hot.
Exactly. Real quick, we were talking a little while back about the Amazon. Now with the deforestation, there's a lot of, I think they're called geoglyphs coming out, and when I think his name is Francisco Orellana in like 1520 something, he went down the Amazon River, and he was noting in his journal that there were these massive cities with thousands of people and a living infrastructure and trade going on in these huge cities. It goes to think that life in the Amazon is not primitive and is not just basic as we think it is, because it just got decimated by smallpox when the Europeans came over there.
Oh yeah, definitely. And after all those people vanished, the jungle buried everything, so you never really could tell they were there because there's a bunch of leaves all over it. And that's not even that long ago. In a geological sense of time.
No, it's pretty recent.
You had no idea that existed until Boosh. We had the capability of finding it, because you can't do that by foot. Just figure out all that.
No, you can't even begin by doing it on foot.
Mm-hmm.
I was wondering, a little bit of a sharp turn. If you had a time machine with a round trip for like a week or a month, or you can choose for how long, I'm curious to know where you would, like, in what point in time you would decide to go to, and what would you want to observe?
I would go to the day before the cataclysmic event of 12,800 years ago to see what was there, first of all, and be like, yep, that's what I thought. And then to watch that massive object come into the atmosphere and decimate it all.
Yeah.
Like if I could be like a bug on a wall and watch it happen. Oh
And,
yeah.
have you listened to America Before, the audiobook?
I have not finished it.
Uh,
I've got a decent portion of it.
yeah, it's a
But,
behemoth, right? It's like 17 hours.
It's a lot. It's a
massive.
lot.
There's
But I definitely need to finish it.
there's one part, and it's been a while since I've listened to it, and I can't find it back. But there's one part where Graham Hancock narrates, like second by second, minute by minute, how it would have been if a huge asteroid hits the Earth, and he talks about flash freezing, then everything just burns to a crisp. Then I think this describes the meteor hitting the ice sheet. It hits the ice sheet. Thousands of ice boulders get flung into the atmosphere and the stratosphere. Everything's on fire. Everything freezes. These giant boulders smash into the ground, tens of kilometers further. Yeah, it's bone chilling, absolutely bone chilling.
Definitely. And there are other ancient myths, like from Native American cultures, talking about objects coming out of the sky and killing all the massive animals.
Yeah,
and
right. The megafauna.
The Arlington Farm mastodon is another thing to look up. It's where mastodon, it looks like it was crushed by a massive object. Something came out of the sky and pancaked this mastodon, just like splat. And it hit it so hard that its back right leg where it was standing was still standing up straight and down. It like broke off its leg and it kept it just like standing there.
Jesus.
It's how hard it got hit. Put it that way. That's
sounds like
that's
such
crazy.
a nightmare scenario. Jesus Christ. To almost wrap up, if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would you pick?
Wow. Okay, that's a hard one. Let me think. Randall Carlson.
Yeah.
Randall Carlson. Heck yeah. that would be dope. That'd be super dope. Graham can come too. Graham Hancock, but Randall Carlson, man, he's I love that dude's mind. Great.
Yeah. I had exams recently and I had some essays to write, but it's the same. Like it draws you in, and before you know it, you're an hour and a half later, and you just want to start the next one because he's like a talking encyclopedia about this stuff. It's insane how well articulated he can bring over these gigantic ideas.
And well read.
Exactly.
Remarkably well read.
And then maybe a last question. If you could place a billboard with a message on it for as many people as possible to see, what would the message be?
It is time for us to wake up and find the truth of our human species.
I think that's not too bad, huh? And I think that's also what the TikTok account is all about, no?
Yes, sir. That's what it is.
Right. All right. It's been almost 2 hours. I would say like an hour and a half, an hour, 45 minutes. Rivus, I cannot thank you enough for your time. It's been such a pleasure. You're very knowledgeable about the topic. I really hope that we can do one of these down the line in the future.
Once you figure out your audio crap.
Yeah. once I get a little bit more technology savvy, we'll do it.
Everybody down, bro.
Yeah, I'm sorry, man. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I'll just make you that much better later.
We'll do a proper live stream, and yeah, man, it was such a pleasure.
No problem, dude.
All right, thanks, man. Take care.
Later.